What happens when the world of wrestling, where reality and fiction dance on the edge of chaos, pushes its stories too far? When the line between character and human being blurs beyond repair. Tonight, we dive into the explosive world of 17 female wrestlers whose storylines didn't just cross the line, they erased it. This isn't about scripted drama. This is about obsession, manipulation, emotional breakdowns, and the hidden scars left behind the glittering stage lights. Welcome to the truth behind the spectacle. It begins in the late 90s, when women's wrestling was treated less like sport and more like entertainment bait. They were warriors, yes, but also victims of storylines written by men who thought controversy equals success. A kiss here, a betrayal there, a fake wedding, an outrageous scandal. But behind every shock value moment, there was a real woman forced to play along. Take Trish Stratus. Once scripted to bark like a dog in front of thousands, humiliated on live television, all for ratings. The crowd roared, but the price she paid in dignity and respect still echoes through wrestling history. Then Lita, a genuine athlete, pulled into a love triangle that wasn't just fake, it tore apart real friendships and ended careers. Fans blurred fiction and reality, hating her for something she didn't even control. When her storyline betrayal aired, death threats poured in. Yes, death threats for a storyline. Mickie James, a storyline where obsession turned into full-on character insanity. It made her famous, but typecast her for years. She later admitted, it was genius writing. But soul-crushing performance. Because she wasn't playing crazy, she was being asked to become crazy. And then there's AJ Lee, whose character was written as a psychotic girlfriend, even though she was one of the most talented mic workers in the business. Every week, her character's identity shifted: girlfriend, manipulator, love interest, rarely champion. Charlotte Flair, daughter of Ric Flair, faced another side of it, the impossible legacy storyline. Her greatness became her curse. The writers made her success seem like entitlement. Fans turned on her not because she failed, but because the story made her too perfect. Becky Lynch fought the opposite war. From being overlooked to the man. But even her story became twisted by reality. Her real-life injury turned her into a hero, but when she returned, the machine tried to rewrite her fame into arrogance. She fought the story, and for a while. Sasha Banks, the boss. Her storyline took her from glory to breakdown, both in the script and in real life. When she walked out of WWE in 2022, it wasn't rebellion, it was exhaustion. She wasn't just a character walking away, she was a woman taking her power back. Bayley. Once the embodiment of innocence. The hugger, the hero. Then the writers decided, she's too soft. Break her. They made her betray her best friend, rip her fan base apart, and transform into something unrecognizable. It worked, but it broke something in her, too. Paige. The anti-diva. Her real life became more dramatic than any storyline: scandal, leaks, suspension, humiliation. She was written into chaos both on screen and off. Paige didn't go too far, the storyline did. Natalya, the veteran. Her character became the punchline of jokes. Cat obsessions, awkward humor, losing streaks. Years of hard work buried under bad writing and cheap laughs. Ronda Rousey. The real fighter who entered the scripted world. But when the crowd turned on her storyline, the woman who conquered UFC began losing to crowd politics. Reality didn't follow the script, and that's what made her unravel. Alexa Bliss. Possession storylines. Fiend magic. Puppets. She became a character trapped in a horror movie. It was creative, but also painful. Behind the smile, Alexa was dealing with injuries, anxiety, and constant reinvention. Bianca Belair. One of the strongest athletes alive. But even she was dragged into storylines where she had to prove herself again and again, because dominance, when it comes from a woman, is something wrestling still struggles to handle. Rhea Ripley. The nightmare. But when her story leaned into control and manipulation, critics said it blurred too close to abuse themes. Fans cheered, others worried. It was powerful, but disturbing. Liv Morgan. The underdog turned obsessed lover. Another romantic storyline that stole her momentum. A talent waiting to rise, but drowned in drama instead of triumph. Zelina Vega. The rebel who was fired for standing up for her rights to stream online. Real life clashed with storyline power. WWE called it discipline. The world called it hypocrisy. And finally, Nia Jax. Portrayed as too rough, too dominant, too uncontrollable. But who decided that? Storylines did. Real-life incidents twisted into her character until fans couldn't separate fiction from fact. 17 women. 17 stories. Each proving one truth: Sometimes, it's not the wrestlers who go too far, it's the storylines that push them past their limits. And now, as the lights dim and the roar of the crowd fades, we reach the final bell, not of a match, but of a truth the industry often hides. For decades, the wrestling ring has been called a stage, a theater of the body. But what happens when that theater forgets the actors are human? When every twist for ratings becomes a scar for life? Those 17 women weren't just characters. They were pioneers, powerhouses, dreamers who carried the business through eras of disrespect and reinvention. They made fans believe in pain, in passion, in redemption. But the scripts they followed, those weren't always crafted from creativity. Sometimes, they were born from ego, control, and a toxic hunger for controversy. When Trish Stratus was forced to kneel in humiliation, it wasn't empowerment, it was exploitation disguised as entertainment. When Lita's private life was broadcast as a love triangle for shock value, it wasn't storytelling, it was emotional warfare. When Paige's real struggles became tabloid gold, it wasn't drama, it was a warning. These stories show something far bigger than wrestling, they reveal the dark art of control. The way fame, image, and emotion are rewritten until a person becomes a product. Until she no longer knows if she's performing, or surviving. Some fans cheered. Some booed. Some never knew the damage done behind the scenes. But every time the script crossed too far, another piece of reality was lost. The line blurred, fiction swallowed truth. And the women who gave everything to the ring were left to pick up what the storyline destroyed. Think about Sasha Banks and Naomi walking out mid-show. That wasn't rebellion, that was reclamation. They weren't quitting, they were breaking free. Think about Bayley reinventing herself after being betrayed by her own character's story. That wasn't villainy, it was resilience. Think about Becky Lynch, transforming the system's rejection into a revolution. That wasn't ego, it was evolution. Because for every time a writer said, "Do it for the show," they did it. For every time a producer said, "It's just a storyline," they lived it. For every time the crowd shouted, "This is awesome," they smiled through pain that wasn't in the script. These 17 women walked through fire the audience couldn't see. They weren't just part of the entertainment, they were the entertainment. And they paid the highest price for keeping the illusion alive. And maybe, just maybe, this is the story wrestling doesn't want to tell. That the business that builds legends can also break them. That the spotlight that crowns a champion can also blind her. That the same fans who cheer for their heroes can turn on them when the narrative demands it. But the truth has a way of coming back. Because these women, despite every betrayal written for them, still found their way to the top. They changed the perception of women's wrestling, not by following the script, but by defying it. From divas to revolutionaries. From props to icons. From silence to power. They taught the industry that women don't need shock value to be valuable. They don't need to play lovers, liars, or lunatics to matter. They are athletes, storytellers, and survivors. And maybe now, after years of damage disguised as drama, the world can finally see them for who they are, not as characters trapped in a man-made storyline, but as fighters rewriting their own destinies. Because when the final bell rings, when the storyline fades, when the lights go out and the arena empties, what remains isn't the drama, it's the legacy. A legacy of 17 women who dared to go too far, not in cruelty, but in courage. Who pushed through pain, through bad writing, through disrespect, and turned it into fire. They are the proof that no script, no writer, no company can ever define the spirit of a real fighter. And maybe that's the real ending of this story. Not the one written by producers. But the one written by time, by truth, and by the women themselves. So tonight, as the echoes of their battles fade into silence, remember this. They weren't just part of wrestling history. They are wrestling history. And their fight, for respect, for voice, for control, will echo far beyond the ring. Because every time the lights go down, and another storyline is born, someone, somewhere, will remember what these women endured. And whisper the words that wrestling will never forget never again. The truth that these women, these 17 fighters, were never just part of the show. They were the backbone of it. The pulse that kept it alive. The ones who carried the burden, so that those who came after could carry freedom. And as the lights fade for the last time, maybe we can finally understand, wrestling isn't just about who wins or loses. It's about who survives the script. Who reclaims their story. Who walks out of the ring not just as a performer, but as a person who refused to be rewritten. They entered the ring as characters. They left as warriors. And long after the noise dies down, their fight will continue, not on TV, but in the hearts of every woman who refuses to be told who she is. You turned pain into power. You turned silence into strength. You turned the ring into a revolution. So when someone asks, What happens when the storyline goes too far? You can answer, it creates legends. Legends who no longer follow the script, because they've written their own. And in the end, that's the real victory. Not the pinfall, not the belt, but the freedom to say, this time, the story is mine. And that is the ending wrestling never expected, but the one it always needed.